You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles, and I'm Frank because I have to be. On today's show, we are talking to the father of the seduction community at large, the man who started it all, Mr. Ross Jeffries. Welcome to Frank Talks, Ross.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I was just reflecting, I've been doing radio programs. I started out in 1990. It's 16 years of doing radio, and back when I started, there was no internet to speak of. Back then, they had something called DARPANet, where the various different defense research laboratories could talk to each other. But I never dreamed I'd be doing a broadcast over someone's internet radio program. Who knows what the next decade would bring,
Let's look at this, Ross. I'm going to have to ask you this. Did you ever imagine that something that you developed so many years ago would have affected as many men's lives as it has?
Well, of course, being the absolute cosmic genius I am, I foresaw the whole thing. I foresaw in great detail down the scope of the years exactly where it would go. I foresaw the invention of the World Wide Web and the spread of the community and the different rival schools popping up. I saw it all in a detailed vision. Of course not. I started to look. When I did my first book, I would bring it to my parents' house, and we'd sit at my mom's kitchen table and staple the copies of my original book together. I would carry the orders to the post office. I had no idea whatsoever.
Actually, let's talk about when you started off. Normally when I do this show, I'll ask the person where they were born and to tell me a little bit about their life as it relates to what they're doing now. Were you always the great seducer you are now, or was there a process?
No. It's funny. I rarely work with private clients, but I've been developing some very new technology for breaking people out of deeply stuck learned helplessness. And one of my experimental beta testing subjects, I had him over here, and I was explaining to him that I know exactly how guys are deeply stuck because I used to be that stuck. So I know the exact structure of stuckness, how it self-reinforces, how it feeds itself. So far from it. I was the guy in college who was always the best friend, the buddy, you're such a good friend, but for some reason they didn't want to get naked with me, So no, I was far from that, far from it.
Given what you went through, a lot of guys who go through what you went through sometimes develop a lot of misogyny, anger towards women. Have you gotten over that? And if so, how?
I think underneath the misogyny is really a deep frustration. When guys go through this, it's not really hatred. What's at the center of it is really just a lot of depression, a lot of sadness, a lot of just pent-up frustration. It's a very difficult thing in that area of life to not have your needs met and to have bought into the belief that you'll never have them met, or to buy into the belief that they'll only be met sporadically or poorly and not up to your expectations. And it becomes a self-reinforcing loop.
Now, let's look at where speed seduction is today. It's gone through some metamorphosis since it first started out. How would you define speed seduction as it exists right now?
I would say it's a set of a few technologies working together in harmony. The first technology is a technology for unblocking guys from their fixed beliefs, useless patterns of thinking and emotion, ways of perceiving women and themselves and how men and women interact. So the first third of the technology, I would say, is for radically. And by radically, it comes from the Latin root meaning going right to the root of things. Going right to the root of things is what radical means. So for radically, in every sense of the word, reforming a guy's sense of attractiveness, his beliefs about who he can attract and how he'll go about doing it. So it's the internal transformation. Yes?
Yep.
The second part of the technology, excuse me, I've been talking a lot today, my voice is a little raw. The second part of the technology is the actual what you do in the field to attract women and to seduce women. That's the second part. And the third part, I would say, is developing a learning and motivation strategy to actually consistently apply the tools so you get really good at them. And the third part, though, is really powerful, and that has to do with developing a technology for learning from your mistakes and staying motivated as you go up the learning curve. There's many different schools of seduction and pickup in the community, and I'm not going to get into the relative merits of them, at least not now. I might later in the call, if you ask me, I'll give you my frank opinions. But for now, what I'll say is none of them give you any kind of realistic method for learning from your mistakes and staying motivated. They don't tell you how to learn from what you did. They just say, well, learn from your mistakes and keep going. They don't give you an exact procedure for doing it. And one of my learnings is that in any area of life where a person is deeply stuck, one of the things that's keeping them deeply stuck is they either do not have a strategy for learning from their mistakes, or they're so emotionally blocked that in that area of life they can't or don't apply that strategy. You understand?
Yes.
So that ability to actually learn from your mistakes and stay appropriately motivated is the other chunk. So those are the three chunks of speed seduction, and in every area we've made some big leaps in the past, 5 years.
I have to ask you, who are some of the biggest influences that you have studied under or that you admire that have affected the way, not only how you teach speed seduction, but how it's developed?
Well, currently, I would say I've been fortunate. In the last 4 months, I've been very blessed to discover the work of the person I consider to be the greatest teacher I've ever met in my life, ever. And do understand that I've been into powers of the mind and hypnosis and meditation and the occult and all this stuff since I was a teenager. And that was just a few years ago, but it's been 3 decades that I've been into this stuff, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And 20 years ago I discovered, I stumbled onto NLP, which really blew my mind. But in the last 4 months, I have met a teacher and a set of disciplines that has impressed me more than anything in the last 2 decades. It's been 2 decades since anything impressed me as deeply, and that was NLP back in 1987. The teacher is Shinzen Young, and he teaches a form of meditation called Vipassana. But his applications of Vipassana make it graspable and easily used by Westerners. And he's been a gigantic influence over the last 4 months, his work. His website is Shinzen, 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 Shinzen.org. Absolutely astounding stuff. Other influences, of course, NLP, Richard Bandler, Milton Erickson, who died, before I ever discovered his work, but he's been a huge influence. And some of the other great thinkers, like Robert Anton Wilson, what is the name of the gentleman? Stanislav Grof, who wrote an absolutely brilliant book that I took an entire summer to read called Beyond the Brain. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. Some of his thinking about how people stay deeply stuck. I've been very influenced by Huna, books on Huna, which is a Hawaiian spiritual system. I've been profoundly influenced by my friendship with my spiritual teacher and dear friend Shirlene, who has really softened me and shown me some examples about what coming from the heart and loving people is truly about. She's been an avatar of love who's shown me softened me greatly and shown me some different perspectives. So those are some of the influences on speed seduction and also on how I teach. There are certain skill sets that come together to make someone a teacher. And I think those skill sets have always been present in me in one form or another. It's just, it continues to get better.
I'm really glad you mentioned the topic of softening up and finding love, because later in the show, one of the questions I am going to ask you is, can a master seducer who can seduce any woman he really wants truly find love?
Well, first of all, I don't think there is any such critter. Just like Shinzen says, there are no truly fully enlightened masters who are flawless, okay? There may be people who dip into the experience of enlightenment far more frequently and far more deeply than others, but there's no such critter as a man who can seduce any woman he wants. There ain't no such critter. I've never met one. I'm not one. It's a myth, and it's not really a very useful myth.
All right. We're going to go to commercial right now, and when we come back from commercial, we're going to take your calls. You can give us a call, and you can ask Ross a question directly. Let's go to commercial right now.